Hello again, folks. Today I'm going to show you how I'm going to prepare a couple of these nice chuck roasts. We're going to cook them in the crock pot and make beef stew, or you can make shredded beef out of it. Either way, it turns out the same. And so let's get started here, okay? First of all, I've got the crock pot turned on high setting, and we're going to start out with some mushroom broth, or you could use beef broth. And I'm just going to put about half of this carton in here on the bottom and start getting that warmed up. We'll put the lid on and let that get warmed up while we season the meat next. Now we've unpackaged our chuck roast, and we're going to go ahead and season it with a rub that I make out of black pepper, salt, garlic powder, and onion powder, which is very similar to your Montreal steak seasoning. And don't be afraid to put a lot on there, because once you put it in the crock pot with all that liquid, some of it's going to come off and it's just going to be flavorful. Okay, so we're going to do both sides of this stuff. Now you can see this one I bought 2 days ago, and it's starting to turn a different color. This one I just bought this morning, but that's okay. Beef lasts a few days in the refrigerator. It's just the outside changing color. And you know, a lot of this beef, as they color it with red dye in the butcher shop. You may not know that, but it's true. Okay, all right, so we're gonna get that all patted down. I'm gonna let that sit about 15 minutes, and then we're going to sear it in the frying pan before we put it in the crock pot. Okay, as you can see here, I had put some of that mushroom broth in here. I cut up a big chili pepper, mild chili pepper, a couple of 3 or 4 carrots, 2 yellow onions, and 3 or 4 stalks of celery I put in there with the broth, and I'm getting that thing cooking up and warming up. Next, we're going to take these pieces of meat and we're going to cook them in the pan and sear them before we put them in the crock pot. So now in our skillet here, I'm going to put some olive oil, get that heated up. We're going to put the chuck roast in here and brown it before we put it in the crock pot. Thing about not putting raw meat in the crock pot, I just don't like to do it like that. All right, I threw a little scrap in here. It's another thing I like to do. If you have a little piece of meat, to test the heat of the oil before you start putting it in there, because you don't want to put your meat in cold oil. It doesn't come out good like that. All right. Put one on that side. Put one on this side. Just going to brown these up for about, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 minutes on each side. All right, it's been about 5 minutes. I'm going to turn these over. I've got this pan turned on the high setting. See that? Okay, I'm going to go 5 more minutes, and then we're going to put it in the crock pot. Okay, I think this meat is very much browned, and we're going to throw it in the crock pot now. We're just going to, you see I stirred up all the veggies so they're mixed up evenly. Just kind of lay it in there, and I don't want to pile these on top of each other either. I don't want them to be side by side. Just like we had them in the pan, basically. Okay, that's good. Now, see all this good stuff in this pan? We're going to do something with that now. I'm going to turn down the heat. That's why we saved some of this extra mushroom stock from earlier to put it in here. Okay. Scrape all the burned up seasonings off the bottom here. Got a little bit of celery and onion that we chopped earlier and set aside. Now that we've got our gravy broth up to a boil, I have a small container of mushrooms, sliced mushrooms, and make sure you rinse off these mushrooms before you use them, because you know they grow mushrooms in manure. Yes, manure. Don't want to have manure in your food. So anyway, yeah, rinse them off really good before you put them in there. They do wash them on an assembly line before they load them up in those packages, but I like to rinse them off one more time. Okay, so anyways, hey, let's cook these about 5-10 more minutes. All right, now we're going to add our last two ingredients. A heaping spoon of minced garlic. Maybe even a little more. That's a big crock pot full of stuff. Okay. And last but not least, a can of cream of mushroom soup. You have to put that in here. Stir that all in here. All right, we're going to let that simmer for a little bit, then we're going to throw it in the crock pot. All right, now we've got this all cooked up. It's been about 10 minutes I've been simmering it. I'm going to shut this off and move it out of the way. There's your beef crock pot there. Now it's time for us to pour in this mushroom gravy right on the top. All right. That's going to be delicioso. Now we're going to let that cook on high setting. 6 to 8 hours to cook that thing. And we will check it in about 6 hours. If that meat's falling apart, we're done. But it's got to fall apart with a fork. You don't want to have to cut it with a knife. Okay, guys, we're just going to have to wait now. All right, let's take a look here. Chuck roast's been boiling here for about 5 hours. It's been in the pot for 6 hours. Okay, and now I've turned the heat down to low, but it's still not tender enough and falling apart yet. I could tell it's still a little bit tough. So we're going to let it go for another hour or two, but in the meantime, I'm going to drop a couple of potatoes in here. I cut a bunch of potatoes in half, and we'll throw them in there for the last hour or two, or however how long it takes for this thing to finish off. I'll tell you what, I noticed that a lot of that liquid evaporated because it was up to the rim like that before. But that's normal. It's going to happen. Okay, we're going to go ahead and just cook that another hour or two longer. When the potatoes are done, I imagine that meat's going to be done at the same time. Okay, I think our beef is done. Look at that. Most of the fat actually cooked and melted away. Veggies, everything. Good stuff. So I'm going to make myself a little plate here, and then we'll just try it out. Yummy, yum, yum. Look at that. 8 hours it took to cook this. Only about 30 minutes of preparation, but 8 hours of cooking time. It's been 8 hours. 8 hours for this. I threw a few potatoes in there, as you remember, and the potatoes are done. So let's throw a potato on here. But what we're really concerned about is how this meat turned out. Okay? It's got to be done after all this time. Okay? So what we want is something that'll pull apart with a fork. Okay? Shouldn't have to cut it with a knife. Look at that. Perfect. So we could have beef stew, pulled beef sandwiches, whatever you want to do with this. But you have to just be patient and let it cook a long time in there. I'm going to throw this piece back in. Good flavor. That's a winner. 8 hours. And as for our potato here, it should just cut easy. See that? Oh yeah. Good stuff. Mix up a little bit of our gravy juice here. Put it on our potato. A little onion, little pepper. There it is, folks. Okay, well, I'm going to eat my little bit of late lunch, early dinner, we'll call it. And the rest of this I'm going to separate. I'm going to freeze some and we'll eat some tonight. But yeah, that's about it for our chuck roast and the crock pot. Very good flavor. Okay, everybody, thanks for watching and we'll see you next time. Enjoy.